ASMR. I'm Nicole. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in to this channel. I truly appreciate you. And if you're new here and you enjoy whispered true crime, please consider subscribing to the channel. I post 2 times a week, on Monday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I recommend using headphones if you would like to hear the gentle mic brushing. Now let's get right to tonight's case. Tonight we are headed to England. Shout out to all my friends in England. So now I'm pretty sure that everyone read the title or saw the thumbnail, and so no one should be shocked to hear that. Well, you'll be shocked, but you heard it already. A woman lived with her dead parents for 4 years. Now, without knowing the story, we all jump to certain conclusions. So I'm thinking she slept in the bed with them. I feel like I've heard stories like that before. That was my first thought. Is that what happened? Well, you'll find out. But I thought I would share what my first thought was, because such crazy things are going on in this world. It is outrageous. Somebody once asked me in the comments, do I think I will ever run out of true crime cases for this channel? And unfortunately I won't, because people keep committing crimes. So there's always going to be something. I mean, I wish that crimes would stop. There's plenty of crimes to talk about from the past, believe me. But anyway, let's get to it. So we are talking about the case of Virginia McCullough. That's how they're pronouncing it. On everything I've seen, McCullough. Okay. And it happened in England in 2019. So, let's begin the story in June of 2019. And we don't have a lot of background on Virginia. You know, I can't tell you about much of her childhood or much of her private life, but I'm going to tell you everything I was able to find. So, in June of 2019, she was 31, and she was single, never married, didn't have a boyfriend or a partner, never had any children. She didn't have a job. She had worked most recently in 2017 as a barmaid. I'm not sure for how long. And she was living with her parents in Pump Hill, Great Baddow, England. Now, Great Baddow is a large suburban village and civil parish in the Chelmsford, if that's how you pronounce it, borough of Essex, England. So, as I said, she was living with her parents, 70-year-old John and 71-year-old Lois McCullough. So, she was actually the youngest daughter. Her parents had raised 5 girls, so she had 4 older sisters. And we know absolutely nothing about them. Okay, they've remained anonymous throughout this case. Now, John, her father, was a retired business studies lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University Lois had spent most of her adulthood, as a stay-at-home mom to her 5 daughters. And she suffered with agoraphobia, and she was said to have traits of OCD, specifically involving germs and cleaning. Supposedly, Virginia was helping to care for them in their old age. If 70 is considered old age these days, I'm not sure. Now, according to the 4 other sisters, not Virginia, but the other sisters, when they spoke of their parents, they said the following, quote, "Our dad was caring and hardworking, and he had a passion for education and writing. He worked tirelessly in his career in university education, which spanned many years. Dad enjoyed lots of hobbies, with particular favorites being golf and snooker." Can anyone tell me what snooker is? As we think of Dad, we remember the numerous jokes he used to tell us and the laughs he gave us. Our mom was kind, caring, and thoughtful. Mom delighted in her grandchildren. So there were grandchildren, we don't know how many or their ages. She had friends from around the world through her pen friend hobby, many of whom she had written to for several decades. Mom had a passion for history and maintained a keen interest in the royal family. Mom and Dad loved their trips to the seaside together, where they enjoyed many walks and visited lots of different attractions. Their love for the seaside was so great, they were hoping to move to the coast in their retirement years. Mom and Dad always enjoyed the time they spent with us. Family was their pride and joy. End quote. So these remarks were all said about them after their passing. But in addition to all these lovely remarks, there was another side to the parents. Reportedly, they were old-fashioned, especially when it came to disciplining their children. And they didn't ever show any affection towards the kids or towards each other. Although it was felt that they did love their children, they just never showed it. And the kids were disciplined through smacking. One of the daughters had a problem with bedwetting, and she was punished by smacking for that. Social services had been involved for a period of time with the family, although we do not know the details. Neighbors recall having heard Lois, the mother, screaming in anger, like they could hear her from outside their home. Although they didn't know who she was yelling at or what it was about, but they heard that. But in general, neighbors reported that Lois and John were pretty quiet and they kept to themselves, but they seemed like normal, decent people. Virginia reported that until she was 13, her mother used to smack her while she took a bath. She described her mother as a, quote, happiness hoover, end quote, like a vacuum that sucked up her happiness. Now, when she said this, her sisters responded by stating that Virginia is a compulsive liar. So much so that she had even faked a pregnancy. She had told her family that she was pregnant. She had even bought a baby bump to wear, and then she faked a miscarriage at the end. Who knows why? Just for attention? Most probably. But it is very, very sick to do that, don't you think? She also lied to her parents about going to school to become a professional artist. And she told them that she had jobs that she'd never had. She used to leave the house every day and go to a fake job. She would just leave, go who knows where, and then come back at the end of the day so they would think she was working. She told her siblings that she paid rent to her parents for living there, but she never did. So how was she supporting herself? Well, by stealing from her parents, by using their credit cards when they didn't know it. And she had racked up tons of debt in their names. And when they noticed, their bills, and they were like, what is this? Like, I didn't buy this. Like, what? She told them they had been scammed, that these were all scams, and they believed it. Now, with this whole big charade and web of lies that she was building, it was becoming like more than a full-time job. And you would think, and I would think, well, why don't you just go get a job? It would be easier for you to go get a job, a real job, get some money, and then you wouldn't have to steal your parents' money and you wouldn't have to lie, and life would be more simple, right? Wrong. Of course, wrong. So she decided to go another route. In March of 2019, Virginia started to collect a large amount of prescription drugs. In May of 2019, she bought a knife and some tools that you use to crush medication. She started putting small doses of the medications into her parents' lunches to, quote, test their effects, end quote. Her father's drink was drugged by her on June 15th when she, quote, used him as a guinea pig, end quote, to further test the effects. So, finally, on June 17th, 2019, she prepared cocktails for them, alcoholic drinks, mixed with the crushed prescription drugs, and she served it to them that evening. And John, her father, who drank the whole thing, it was enough to kill him, and by the next morning, sadly, he was dead. But her mother wasn't much of a drinker. She didn't have enough of it to kill her, and she was alive the next morning. So, that is clearly why she needed to buy that knife, I suppose. She was planning ahead. But before even trying the knife, she started hitting her mother with a hammer in the head to try to kill her. And her mother was asking her, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing this to me?" And she just kept hitting her, but she realized the hammer was not gonna do it. So she went and got that knife, and she finished the job. Now, somehow she managed to cut her own hand in the process, and she went to her local doctor and got treatment for it, saying that she cut herself while she was chopping up vegetables. Then she drove into town to purchase plastic gloves and sleeping bags using her father's credit card. She put their bodies in the plastic bags and the sleeping bags. She created a, quote, makeshift mausoleum, end quote, out of cinder blocks in her father's downstairs study, which was the room that he died in, actually. And so she put his body inside of that mausoleum, obviously, and she covered the structure with multiple blankets and pictures and paintings on the top. For her mother, she simply placed her in the plastic bag and in be her father. I don't know how. And she continued to live in the house where her parents' bodies were. And she continued to collect their pensions. She maxed out their credit cards. She sold their possessions. She gambled 21,193 pounds of their money on online betting sites. Apparently she had a gambling addiction. In total, she had gotten 149,697 pounds from her crime. And it was said she had wasted all of the money. She hadn't bought anything of any value. Now, conveniently for her, the pandemic happened. Remember, she had killed her parents in June of 2019. And by early 2020, people started going into lockdown. And that was great for trying to hide your parents' bodies, right? Because people were being restricted from going out. So that really helped her out a bit. But now one of the things that she had done to conceal their absence was that she would keep rescheduling doctor's appointments, especially for her father. So she would call and cancel probably the first round of appointments that they had right after they died. She called and canceled, and she rescheduled. Then she had to call again to cancel that appointment and then reschedule again. Well, she kept doing this for 4 years. She had called one doctor's office 185 times. And finally, they became very suspicious. So, after 4 years of this, they contacted the police to do a welfare check on John and Lois. On September 13th of 2023, officers went to the home, and at that time they were just considering this a missing persons case. So they asked Virginia about her parents' whereabouts, and she said they were traveling and they would be back in October. But the officers were suspicious, so they got a search warrant and they came back 2 days later. But that time they didn't ring the bell, they just broke right in. And they arrested Virginia, who acted so calm, you would not believe it. She right away confessed to the murders, and she told the police where to find the bodies in the house. She stated, quote, "I did know that this day would come eventually. I deserve to get what's coming sentence-wise because that's the right thing to do, and then that might give me a bit of peace," end quote. She even tried to joke a little bit with the officers. She said, quote, "Cheer up, at least you caught the bad guy," end quote. But they did not laugh at this at all. They were not in any kind of joking mood after finding what they found. Now, during the questioning, she told them that she had beaten her mother to death. She said the act was, quote, "like someone badly playing the xylophone or something," end quote. And she told them where to find the knife and the hammer, which she said would still have blood on it. And like I said, she was so calm. She sounded like this sweet little mouse talking to them. You have to see it to believe it. Like nothing bad had happened. She's just telling them this sweet little story. So she was charged with 2 counts of murder and was remanded in custody. The investigation revealed that Lois had died from stab wounds to the chest, but the cause of death for John McCullough was pending further investigation. Their bodies were found in such a state of decomposition that they had to be identified using dental records. It was discovered that since the murder of her parents, Virginia had changed hers SIM card swaps in just a year's time. Since July of 2020, Virginia had called the police 238 times to make trivial complaints about neighborhood matters, like someone was being too loud or, little unimportant things mostly. So she clearly was not trying to keep a very low profile at all. There was even a time when a police officer came into her house to take a report from her, and they didn't know that there were any dead bodies in the house. Now, reportedly, Virginia has been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum, and it was said that she does suffer with paranoia. Whether or not that came before or after she killed her parents, I don't know. So after the story broke, neighbors of the family described Virginia as, quote, quite chatty and a little bit odd, end quote. One neighbor said that Virginia had, quote, been carrying on going up to the Chinese takeaway like nothing has happened, end quote. He said that he thought she lived alone there at the house, and he said that he didn't think she was any trouble or anything. He just knew her to say like hello and goodbye, and that was about it. So he was just surprised, I guess, that she had killed her parents, had 2 dead bodies living there, and acted like there was nothing strange happening. She's just living her life. Another neighbor said that Virginia was, quote, quite chatty and would always come and descend on you. It would be a fair comment to say she was slightly irrational with her thinking. She didn't appear to be a threat of any kind, end quote. A worker at a local shop said that Virginia told him that her parents had moved to the seaside, and he said that he had not seen them since before the pandemic, but that he used to see them 2 or 3 times a week. He said that they, quote, seemed nice, normal people. We're all shocked. We didn't think she was capable of this, end quote. He said that she would often speak to the other workers in the shop as well, and she would buy them things. Quote, if anything, she was just like a pest. She would be talking about the problems she had in the street, end quote. So I guess she was talking about those problems that she had in her neighborhood that she called the police about. Like she wasn't the biggest problem on the street. So this worker also said that she was, quote, a little bit odd. Sometimes she would come in and go, do you want a coffee? Then 5 minutes later, there would be a coffee sitting there, end quote. So there were multiple hearings regarding her case. And finally, at a hearing on July 4th of 2024, Virginia McCullough pleaded guilty to both counts of murder, and a sentencing hearing was scheduled for October. On October 11th, 2024, so just recently, Judge Johnson sentenced her to life imprisonment, and she can be considered for parole after 36 years. The judge told her she had robbed her parents of, quote, dignity in death. Your conduct amounted to a gross violation of the trust that should exist between parents and their children, end quote. He explained why he didn't give her what they call a whole life tariff. Quote, having regard to all the circumstances of the case, including your immediate admissions to Miss McCullough. My heart goes out to their family for this unthinkable tragedy. Now, first, let's talk about the other 4 daughters, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering. How did they go for 4 years without coming around to try to visit their parents at least once? All 4 of them, none of them came to visit at any point in 4 years. Now, we do not know anything at all about their circumstances, about their relationship with the parents from the past, about where they lived. None of it. So, I'm not going to judge them in any way, shape, or form. There's just not enough information to even talk about it, really. Although it does make you wonder, but we don't know. We do not know. And the truth is, even if they had visited, that wouldn't have saved their parents. They already would have been dead. So there's that. I'm sure at this point they feel absolutely horrible about it, though, I am sure. So what can I say about Virginia? I mean, we're all probably thinking the same things. Regardless of any mental disorders she had, she was acting on pure greed. She wanted money, and she didn't want to have to work for the money, so she decided that the best thing for her to do would be to kill her parents. She was completely cold-blooded. She didn't have an ounce of empathy whatsoever. Completely self-centered and attention-seeking. Like, what was that all about? Why did she go ahead and kill her parents and weave this huge web of lies and then risk it all by calling the police so often? Wouldn't you think that someone who had hidden 2 bodies, dead bodies in their home, would try to act like a wallflower, just like a part of the scenery of the world, just not call any attention to themselves whatsoever? But no, she was exactly the opposite. And I can't help but bring up the Menendez brothers, because they also killed their parents. I mean, it's a much different story, but it's the same crime, right? It's a premeditated murder of both parents. And they got life in prison with no chance of parole. We'll see what's going to happen in the future, if that's going to be, changed. But that was their original sentence. Now, was their crime so much worse than hers? Because the judge in her case just gave her life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years. And he said it wasn't such a serious case that she needed a whole life tariff. So is it just because the